What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Get the Bag podcast. I'm your host, Claudia Castro. Got my co-host, Tim Park.
What's
We
up,
have a
fam?
exciting, what's going on? We have a really exciting topic, a really trendy topic of what's going on right now in the real estate space, specifically commercial. But before we get all into that, don't forget to subscribe, like this episode, follow us on IG, all the things. We're on here every week, every Wednesdays. We'll either have a guest or discuss the trending topic that's going on in the real estate or entrepreneurial space because we about getting that bag. So this specific topic is interesting because I think it's really changed since COVID hit, right? All
Yeah.
these companies were utilizing and put in so much money, right? And I remember myself being in the tech space, it was all about the perks, right? All about the office perks of
Yeah.
getting lunch delivered to you, snacks, basically a whole convenience store in the building, having your own office space. But that changed since COVID. A lot of
hmm
companies were forced to go remote. A lot of companies were first forced to do that. And now that COVID has kind of, just sort of come and gone. I mean, it's still around, but now companies are like, hey, why don't you guys come back? It's time to come back. And people are really putting their foot down and saying, like, no, it's
hmm
actually, I don't want to go back to the office. I think
Yeah.
in some cases, some companies are actually demanding their teams come back. There's some that's like offering them a hybrid approach. I think my brother works for a tech company and they do it where it's like, hey, you at least have to come in once a week for all
hmm
hands meeting with or whatnot. But this has really changed the trajectory of office buildings and what you can do with it. And I think there's pros and cons. There's a ton of space empty, which is what we're going to discuss today. Is really it's a problem. It's become a problem because you have empty spaces coast
Yeah.
to coast from LA to New York. So we're going to
Yeah.
break that down. But um, kind of when you kind of started in the commercial space, I mean, I think it sort of started, and I think now at this point, I think investors are having to be creative with what the exit strategy that they can utilize in terms of office spaces.
Yeah. I think everything that you just mentioned, uh, the world has changed ever since COVID, and I think the economy has changed as well. Just with interest rates high and the biggest issue was is that they had short-term loans on these office buildings, so that's why
Right.
they're scrambling to kind of get this all um you know like they can't even sell these buildings just because at the market that or at the rate that they want, just because they don't have any revenue coming in because there's nobody in the offices. So
Right.
I think when I first started in real estate and commercial, we did look into some offices, but it still wasn't a go-to asset that we looked into. But mostly it was multifamily is bread and butter, of course, and then
Right.
medical, and then industrial, which are still top
Yeah.
asset classes that we look into. But offices is definitely taking a hit. And I know people that want this to happen so they can take over the asset at a 60%, even 70% discount, and then
Right.
hold. Right, they hold it, and, because they feel real estate's a cycle. It'll come back in some way, some form, which turning that asset into something different that doesn't even mean it's an office space.
Right.
I think LA has passed an ordinance in regards to being easier for office spaces downtown to turn into residential.
Right.
So I think as this problem continues, I think working with the government and the city and what can be done to think outside the box for these huge buildings that are empty. And I think people got a taste of what it is to work from home, and they like that,
They don't want to go
and
back.
they want to go back. So how do you
Right.
entice people to come back, or at least come back for part of the week, right?
Yeah.
And but there's something to say about, the synergy of being around people in a work environment. I think that's still kind of
Yeah.
needed, um, because I think people that are growing up in the age of, or at least their professional careers in
Hmm.
the COVID era, lack some of the, interpersonal skills of
Oh,
communication
totally.
face to face, right?
Right.
Everything's through a screen, or email, or Zoom, or whatever conference call you're going to be using. It's just
StreamYard.
StreamYard. That's right. So the landscape has just changed so much, and we can see the effects. And the effects of Office will continue for, I think, the next couple of years. So
I agree. I think you touched upon like really, really good points because you're right. It's like, I mean, even the landscape of the downtown areas in these metro markets have changed, right? Like you look at downtown LA pre-COVID and now is so different. There's so much more homeless communities in the
yeah,
same and this is where it's an economic impact. The same
yeah,
can be said about
100%.
LA, downtown LA. People are like, it's so dangerous now compared to what it was because the police force they had to let go due to COVID. So there's a lot of impacts. Not only does it impact the office space or the office building, but also the restaurants, the cafes where people
Yeah,
go to, right? In between
exactly.
that's always bustling, right? Because you have people during lunchtime, breakfast, snacks, whatever. Those are also getting hit where they're having to sell or move out of those spaces. So it's a trickle effect um, with this COVID, with how like COVID has impacted the whole office space. But I think I read somewhere, or I think you posted somewhere, at least in San Francisco, which has a ton of office space. There's like 27.1 million square feet of empty office spaces, and that's insane. That's a lot of
That is
space
crazy. Yeah.
that's being impacted. But you're right. It's like, and that's kind of the problem. It's like, how can you entice people? You've given them a taste of working from home, and if they're performing, why are we wanting to force that? I think either you have to adapt to the new age and figure out how you can utilize the office space, and also like when you come into an investment like that, is having exit strategies, multiple exit
Mm,
strategies, like how we talk about multifamily is like, okay, if you're getting an office space, you can't always depend on a tech company to rent it out or
yeah.
whatever to lease it out to you. And that was something that the company I worked for, we went fully remote right before COVID hit. So we're really
Oh
lucky
wow.
in like the timing. But if you think about the overhead costs of renting an office space, it's really, really expensive. And that was kind of the main driving force in doing that. But imagining like going from an office space to remote and completely going fully remote,
Mm-hmm.
that takes time. And like, how do you build that, the social kind of community within a team? You do lose that, and it's really
Yeah.
even for my old company that it did affect us where it was like, okay, the new kids on the block after the fact that got hired, we just don't have the same connection as the people we
Yeah.
met through the office. So I think that's going to be a challenge for sure. But at the end of the day, it's like it's all about profit, right? It's all about money. And if people can save money by not renting out offices, or if people are locked into leases,
Mm-hmm.
um, they do kind of have to they have to adapt to maybe a hybrid approach where
Sure.
it's like, hey, you get to be in the office once a week. That's where we can really focus on community building or whatnot. But this is it's a really interesting problem that's I'm curious to see how it pans out. I think there's already certain markets. I think somebody was telling me in Austin. I think we're meeting with someone last week who was telling us that they converted. Was it in Austin? They converted an office space, or maybe you were telling me. I don't know. I think maybe it was a high school, but it's like you have to be creative in this way where
Mm-hmm.
you convert office spaces into multiple units or an event space. Like you just have
Mm-hmm.
to think outside the box.
Yeah. And I think the more I think office building owners have this outside of the way of thinking, whether it's turning it to residential or turning it into like, maybe in the middle. I think I read the same thing. That's where, they turned in the middle of it into a restaurant, or, so there at
Right.
least traffic into coming into the building. Right. So just coming up with, I think I even saw, I don't know if it was downtown here. I think it is downtown here. They put a virtual golf course into one of the office spaces, like the whole floor. So you would go into,
Right.
a different office, and it would be a, golf screen, as that was the hole that you would play. And then you go into another,
Right.
basically room, and that would be, you know, the second, um, par three or whatever the case may be. So, which
Right.
is interesting. It's an interesting concept. Or, so like as Top Golf and events like that, because people still want to go out, they want to do things, right? If they
Right.
can do something within the city that instead of driving so far or whatever the case may be. But like you're saying, it does have to change, and people have to adapt. So like I think the percentage now is like 46% of workers now work from home, and
Yeah.
that is crazy. That number is crazy.
I mean, it's just a new way of working. I mean, that's we're in a revolutionary like stage. I feel like where we're transitioning from the typical 9 to 5 of going to the office, commuting, to now it's like having the luxury of like having your own building out your own office space and being more productive. Like I think Camille mentioned, like, hey, I'm way more productive when I'm at home, no distractions, no what do you call it, like what I think ice cooler conversations or whatever, where it's like you're
Yeah,
having to like be
water
social.
cooler. Yeah, yeah.
Water cooler, there you go.
Mhm.
And so just that's this really is a future of work, and it's like, what is that going to lead to? And there's so many aspects, there's so many implications with these empty office spaces. I think I was reading about the environmental implications as well, of like
Mm,
just having unnecessary energy consumption and carbon emissions as well in these offices that are just sitting there, right? It's like, how can we reduce that? And then I think also talking about like what how government is intervening too,
mm,
like implementing tax breaks, like, and I think we talked about this, repurposing these vacant buildings, but
yeah,
tax breaks as well for businesses occupying those spaces can really help in kind of converting or doing something with these empty spaces. So
yeah,
I think there's things being talked about, even in like rezoning certain things. Like,
yeah.
okay, it was zoned for an office building, but now it's going to be zoned for something else. So I think there's steps, but there's not really a real plan to in place because it's unique, right, to every owner on like what they want to do.
100%. Um, Another thing that I've been seeing too is that UCLA has been buying up a lot of these office spaces and turning them into mini campuses, for
Mm-hmm.
office buildings. So, which is great. They may have like, half the floors as classrooms or something like that. So, and
Right.
they buy pennies on the dollar basically, and they have more footprint throughout Los Angeles. I think USC is doing the same thing as well. So I think universities are one aspect of where that could be very enticing to
Right.
purchase office buildings to increase their footprint in areas that they might not. So students don't have to travel so far to come into the campus. They just have
Right.
satellite um, classrooms, and they still do classes from, I think, um, via online as well too. So I think
Right.
there's a hybrid there, but I think they're coming, some professions you need to come into like the office, right? In some
I mean, you have doctors, right?
right,
Hospitals, like
right,
there's still going to
exactly.
be, like you said, there's still going to be a need for specific
Hmm.
professions, but people need to adapt. Like this is the new world. We're now living in a world of AI, right? Like when
Yeah.
AI isn't like it's like how are we going to implement AI and like
Mm,
virtual reality and all these aspects
right.
of that. So it's going to be really interesting what's going to happen. But I think this is all happening with like how the with the market shifting as well, and like you're saying, people are paying these for these office buildings pennies on the dollar, um, and you know it's also like they have all this cash too, so it's like taking advantage of like the falling market and these really desperate owners that need to sell because I think you mentioned earlier with the loans, you know, a lot of these owners kind of have these loans that they can't refinance. So what's you know there's going to be this like huge wave of companies that you know they have until a specific time frame to pay, right? So we're kind of leaning into over the next year. We're going to see the impact of these homeowners, and these are the types that maybe you want to contact, right? If you're in commercial or if you have the broker relationships, where it's going to even be less half a penny on the dollar because of where the market's at.
Yeah, sorry, there's an
Um,
alarm going off in here, so
all
that's
right,
why
well,
I
I
had to
can
put it
keep
on mute.
talking. I can keep talking. But yeah, so it's really interesting how I mean, from the time I remember I started um, in real estate and like or just kind of dabbling in commercial and like everyone was talking about office buildings this, office buildings that. But I think the people who are taking advantage of it now are those that are creative, can think about it, and I think to Tim's point in an example, I think it was in Austin where they're converting it kind of into like a mixed use building that is like commercial at the bottom and then residential at the top, which you can easily convert that with the office spaces. You already have everything you need, um, and just kind of make enticing people with like really cool stores or really cool experience. I think you were talking about that, right? Make creating more, focusing more on the customer experience more so than anything. It's like how can we include that? So we include the golf experience situation. Even then, I think when I was in Hawaii, I think they created a really cool like surfing experience where you know they have those like surfing I think it's like like those surfing pools or something like
Yeah.
that, where it's like you get to surf and stuff. You have the restaurants and you have the stores as well, and then you can also you have like a hotel. So it's like there's so many things you can actually do with it if you kind of acquire it at a good price.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think you showed me that when you were there, or you posted something that was like that. So I think
Hmm.
creating these different experiences, like you're saying, um, it just helps with the issue at hand, right? So there's okay, we're going through this office, I guess, epidemic or whatever it is, this problem, and how do we help solve that problem? But a lot of people that are investors or in institutional money are coming in and actually buying these as an opportunity, right? So
Right,
they're looking more at the long term because they are buying these huge office buildings at a huge discount, and then now they need a plan on what are they going to do with it, right? So
right,
a lot of the debt is coming. People are walking, I mean, literally walking away from these office buildings. I think I just read,
right.
you know, they're giving it back to the bank, and you
Hmm.
know, these are business. So, but
Right.
this is sorry, there's like a fire alarm going on here. So,
Hmm.
but um,
Yeah. I mean, you're
yeah.
right. I
So
mean,
yeah,
it's happening. No, go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's It's a real thing that's happening right now. So it's just like it's you have and I think it was like I think we were talking to someone the other day too, or last week, talking about walking away. They're like, "Hey, well, it's under my LLC. It's not going to affect me. I can just burn that LLC and like not deal with it." Like people are literally walking away from properties, which is insane. So if you can capture especially if you're in the commercial space, if you can capture these owners, like this is kind of like what wholesalers or if you're in the real estate space, like solving problems, right? You have these owners that no longer want to deal with it. They're done with it, and if you can find another buyer who can actually um, really bring in like new solutions, a new wave of like ideas, uh, you have opportunities there. You can really probably make good money on those deals, because of the need, because the owner is desperate. I mean,
Yeah,
that's motivation. That's the
motivation.
ultimate. Yeah.
That is the ultimate motivation. I mean, like some of these bigger companies have 5 or 6 buildings, and they're motivated to get rid of them. And things that they bought it for, they're actually letting it go for less than they bought it for maybe 10 years ago, or 15 years ago. So it is something where it's just interesting to see in our time. And I think the office space will come back, but what is it going to look like in the
How will
future?
it come back?
Yeah, yeah,
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, even Camille said here, and kind of like what we were talking about, like how you can repurpose it. Private events, photography, art
mm,
studios, pop-ups. It's there will be a need for sure, but it's like we're in this transition period along with like how the market's being hit. That you know, there's right now people are kind of like, well, what's going to happen? They're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen next before they take the next step, and kind of seeing where the market goes. I think honestly, people are ready. They're cash heavy. I think they're
yeah,
waiting to see like what's going to happen, before they pull the trigger.
yeah. And to give you guys some idea about like the outstanding loans, I guess, out there or whatever. So, what is coming due? It's like $1.5 trillion that are coming due by the end
By
of
2025, right?
2025. Yep, and just
Yeah.
in LA. That's just in LA. So it's
And so you
like,
imagine all that money from the banks too,
yeah,
that they loaned out nationwide.
yeah,
That's how is that going to affect the economy as well? So
yeah,
I mean, we're already the market's already taken a hit, um, and so it's like we're wondering like, okay, when will this kind of slow down? But just based off of that, I mean, the way the market's kind of going and inflation and everything, 2024, 2025, it's gonna be really interesting times. And so I think that's why people are like, hey, stack your cash, make as much money as
mm-hmm,
you can, because the opportunity is gonna come up. Like people who've been like putting in the work, they're going to be the ones turning things around, as kind of like a 2008 where after the fact, people who actually kept investing, you
yeah,
no longer hear of them. They're retired somewhere.
right,
So that's kind of what we're trying to that's where we're trying to be.
yeah. And I think the biggest people that are going to suffer are the smaller banks that are had the commercial loans that are having these loans coming due,
Right.
right? And so I don't know how they're going to survive. These smaller regional banks. Yeah, they can get money from the government to a certain extent, but to cover a lot of these commercial loans is going to be difficult for them. So I think as that landscape tends to pan out, then these smaller banks are going to suffer. The other thing is all these layoffs that have been happening as well. You'll see that in
Mm-hmm.
tech. There's always
It's
in
already
tech,
happening. It's been
yeah,
happening.
yeah. And then entertainment industry, I mean, Disney laid off a bunch of people from ESPN, and so
Well, that's
even
also AI, right? With like
yep,
where AI
yep,
is coming in, like we are in like a revolutionary period where we're transitioning not just the market, but also like the landscape of work in and of itself. Like AI is going to be huge. And so, I mean, I visited my brother over the weekend and I was asking him because he's a product designer. And I was like, how are you using AI? How are you guys implementing it in your company? He's like, yeah, we're already integrating it, have an API with Chat GPT-4 and like finding ways of like how we can chat with our customers. And
Mm,
that's an added feature. So it's just finding ways to like make more money
mm-hmm.
using AI. So that's a thing right now, as well as you can't just sit and not use AI or not utilize AI, because that is a future. So that's also another added element to the layoffs as well. Is again, people with the economy hitting and people wanting, it's hard to ask for money right now. It's really hard. So like my old company, getting a loan, being qualified, they look at your numbers, right? They look at your profit margins, they look at your metrics. And if you're not hitting it, or if you're in a certain category, they're gonna not want to loan you money. And when they can't loan you money, I mean, you're kind of going to fall in the red. So it's like, what do? You cut the costs. All right, you cut the salaries, um, things like that. So you just have to find a way to really just sort of get used to or adapt or die. They keep saying, which is really dramatic, but it's the truth. And I know Camille is on that AI Bard. So if you really haven't gone into AI, uh, really look it up. I think we did do an episode on AI earlier this year. It may be due to we may be due to do another one because there's so much that has changed even since we last did it, and like how we're implementing it. But I think more and more you're going to see more companies actually integrate with the different chat GPTs. So now that right now there's chat GPT-4, I think there may be 5 or 6, but it's going to keep upgrading. And so like, how are these companies adapting to, not kind of have their company fall off the track? I don't know if your alarm is still going, but I know we're at the end of we're at the end of the episode. So I hope this was really helpful. And I think like anything in real estate, it's really important whether you are in wholesaling, you're like office spaces. Like, what does that have to do with me? It's all a trickle effect, guys. Like with commercial and residential, I mean, we're seeing with like where the market's being hit, but it's really good for you guys to kind of be um, notified, being understand what's going on in the industry, so that you kind of know what to expect. And there is something to say when you're having conversations with people too, and like to implement, like, and to show people like, hey, I'm reading into what's going on in the industry, because this could affect you one way or another, whether you're being laid off or your tenants, right, not being able
Yeah.
to pay rent because they got laid off, things like that. So it's all combined. It's all part of the picture. So you really have to, see where that goes. So we hope you got a lot out of it. Um, get into AI. I think we should maybe bring on Camille to do a Bard kind showcase of how you can use AI, because again, a lot has changed, I think, since the last time we started talking about it. So hope you guys had uh, you know got a lot out of this. We'll be back next week, same time. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on IG, like this channel, all the things. It always helps with the algorithm. But we'll be back next week. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you guys later.